Excellent job, Izzy. Thank you so much. John Fogarty, where's John at? I'd like to, John, if you don't mind, could you come and say a prayer for us right quick? And then we'll get started. I had dinner with Congressman Duncan beforehand, and he said John Fogarty is the only man that he knows that can talk longer than he can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You would have to tell me again because I left all my hair in the big league. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's raise your hand. Dear Lord, precious God, Heavenly Father, as we gather here tonight, we listen to these wonderful human beings and running for the cause in this greatest nation of the night. Help us ever be mindful of our wonderful teachings. Forgive us our many shortcuts, and may we continue to shed the wondrous grace on this gracious nation of ours, the United States of America. Have us conduct ourselves today in all pleasing you. In holy name we pray. Amen. Thank you. Good to see you, John.
Good to see you, John.
Before we introduce our candidates, I did want to take a moment and recognize Congressman Duncan. I want to thank him for, first of all, being just so gracious enough to come here. Finding a moderator is not an easy job. You find the right person. And I'm so happy to have him here. He was our congressman from 1988 till 2010, until we had redistricting. Prior to that, his father was our congressman from 1964 until 88. I'm so proud of Jimmy. There were times that I didn't tell you this, but there were one or two times I was really upset with him about a vote. And 99% of the time I agree with him, but there were one or two times, and we all can get like this, and I'd get out bent out of shape, but then as the years went on, I realized he was right about that vote, both of those votes. And the rest of the party caught up with him too. So, Jimmy, if you want to say a word, and just let's welcome Jimmy back to McMinn County.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you very much. And Todd, thank you. Such a fine young man, Todd is. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll be very brief because you're here to hear these candidates tonight. But I will tell you, one of my most favorite stories of all time is Todd told you I represented McMinn County for 24 of my 30 years in Congress. One year I presented a flag to all the students at Rogers Creek Elementary School out in front of the school, spoke to all the kids, and then one of the second grade teachers asked me to stop by her class, and when I stepped in there, she said, "Boys and girls, you remember who this is?" And I just spoke to him in front of the school, and one little fellow raised his hand, kind of scared, nervous voice. He said, "Are you the man on the nickel?" And so I tried to explain that I was not the man on the nickel. But McMinn County, the people here were so kind and so good to me and my dad before me, and I will be forever grateful. And actually, I know there's a few people here from Bradley County I did represent without But I was a lawyer and a judge in Knoxville for 16 years before I went to Congress. A little over half that time was in private law practice, and a little less than half that time was as criminal court judge. And so I'm very interested in what's going on here tonight. I think it's a compliment to every one of you who's here tonight that you would come out on a night like this because you care enough about your community and your country to come to a program such as this. They have told me that the rules are that each candidate first be given, we'll start with the judges' candidates, and then we'll go to the district attorney's candidates, and each candidate will be given 3 to 5 minutes to make an opening statement, and then we really just have time for probably 2 or 3 questions to each candidate, because you're to be given up to 3 minutes to answer the questions, and then you're to be given 3 minutes more to give a closing statement. And when you add that up, it doesn't leave room for very many questions. But Erica Salzman is going to keep the time, and she's going to be my boss. She's going to tell me when I'm supposed to stop somebody. And very proud of her, because she, LMU, Lincoln Memorial University, was kind enough many years ago to name the law school after me. And that law school has now, based on their bar passage rate, has become one of the finest law schools in the Southeast, and it's got the highest enrollment right now it's ever had, so it's going really well. But let's go ahead and get started, and we'll ask the candidates for judge to come forward and each one stand at one of the podiums here. So we'll ask the judges to come forward.
First, I'd like to introduce Judge Sandra Donahue. Sandra received her bachelor's degree in chemistry with a minor in math in 1976. She was raised in a blue-collar town where her parents ran a restaurant. She started work at the age of 10, washing dishes in the kitchen. She worked her way through college and law school, waiting tables at the restaurant. When she graduated from law school in 1984, she entered private practice, doing both civil and criminal work. In 1992, she and Bob Donahue married and began work at the District Attorney General's office in Athens, Tennessee. For the past 30 years, she has practiced only criminal law as a DA, public defender, and judge. During her work with the DA, she was appointed as magistrate judge for the juvenile drug court program in Bradley County, and served in that capacity from 2006 to 2010. In 2014, she was elected as your criminal court judge. As your criminal court judge, she, in conjunction with Judge Freiberg, has resolved over 28,000 charges. Sandra has disposed of 52% of the cases in criminal court, reduced the backlog by 9%, executed over 1,200 search warrants, and started 2 initiatives: the Veterans Court and the Recovery Court for high-need, low-risk offenders. In her spare time, she served in leadership positions at her church, teaches at the police academy, and serves on the board of Cleveland 100. She and her husband of 30 years, Bob, live in Cleveland, where they have 2 cats and a dog. She is beloved stepmom to 2 adult children, their spouses, and 7 precious grandchildren. Her husband, Bob, is a retired U.S. Army soldier and engineer, and taught math at Walker Valley High School. When they lived in Athens, Bob was the chief engineer at Howell. Sandra Donahue. Paul Rush. Paul is a native Tennessean. Paul attended high school in Briarcrest Christian High School and graduated from Bartlett High School. He graduated from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville with a bachelor's degree in political science in 2001. After graduation, he attended the College of William and Mary School of Law in Williamsburg, Virginia in 2001. And he graduated in 2004 from William and Mary with a jurisprudence. Paul moved back to Tennessee, took and passed the bar exam, and was hired and began working at the office of the District Attorney General in the 10th Judicial District under Jerry Estes on December 1st, 2004. As a prosecutor in the 10th Judicial District General's office, he became a prolific trial attorney, working in Sessions Court, Grand Jury, and Criminal Court in McMinn County, Bradley County, Polk County, and Monroe County. As a prosecutor here, he has tried numerous cases, from dogs at large to capital murder cases. Paul was also an adjunct professor for criminal justice studies at Tennessee Wesleyan College in Athens. Paul has worked under 3 attorney generals, Jerry Estes, Steve Bebb, and Stephen Crump. He worked as the Assistant Attorney General for 11 years, and after which time, in January 2016, he accepted a position under Richard Hughes in the Office of Public Defender in the 10th Judicial District. This is his seventh at the Office of the Public Defender. Paul lives in Athens, Tennessee with his wife Tammy, a native of Monroe County, who also works in the 10th Judicial District's Office of the Public Defender. He has taught in-service classes on multiple occasions to multiple law enforcement agencies and is the regular speaker at community functions in McMinn County on the subject of legal and court processes at the request of Sheriff Joe Guy, among others. Welcome, Bob. Thank you.
All right, well, both of you have had very detailed introductions, but we'll go ahead and have you each take 3 to 5 minutes to tell the people a little bit about yourselves and why you want to be judges and what do you think you can accomplish as a judge, and how do you think you can help people and help the community in your role as a judge. So, Judge Donahue, we'll start with you.
All right, thank you. First of all, Todd, thank you. Congressman Duncan, thank you. Thank you, all of you, for coming to watch and listen, to be educated on this very important third branch of government is something that is to be commended. So thank you for being here. I'm not going to go into a lot of my background because Todd has already told you that. But what I would like to talk with you about are some of the challenges that I have observed in the last 7.5 years that I've served as your criminal court judge. One challenge that faces me daily is there is mental health issues and drug issues in virtually every case that I handle. And so if we just use the routine type of dispositions to handle it, those are the kind of people that become the revolving door defendants just coming back over and over to court. And so I fought hard in Nashville to bring a criminal justice liaison to each of the 4 counties of this judicial district. A criminal justice liaison is a mental health professional that can go into the jail, assess what the offender needs, and then part of the disposition on the case can hold those offenders accountable both to the rules of society and their treatment program. And so that's something new that I brought. I also started a veterans treatment court. That's for veterans that become justice involved, and it essentially takes them out of the mainstream system, puts them into a recovery court where we can use the resources, both federal and local, to give them treatment and then closely monitor and supervise their program. So that's mental health issues is one of the challenges that I face. Another challenge is the backlog with the criminal court system. When I was elected in 2014, there was a backlog. And so even though there was the plethora of cases to resolve and dispose of, new cases come in each and every day. I worked hard to reduce that backlog. And during the work, the measures of effectiveness show that I, together with Judge Freiberg, were very effective in the sentences we meted out. In the 10th Judicial District, we have dismissed fewer cases than the state average. We've actually tried more cases than the state average, which shows we're tough on crime, and the rate of recidivism has fallen. So we're better than the state average in terms of repeat offenders. When I talk about the backlog, we were doing well at reducing that backlog until COVID came. COVID had the governor issue the pandemic orders. The Supreme Court said we could have no hearings, no jury trials, we couldn't bring people into court, and that really has created a big backlog. I myself had COVID just 10 days ago, but this is the silver lining that comes from this judicial experience and working through the COVID system. We were able to get technology that we would have never had before. So the state has given me a computer that I can take home or do court remotely. We're able to use programs like Zoom or video conferencing. And so while I was quarantining, I was actually able to do an entire docket from a remote location by having the attorneys send me all of the paperwork. I would review it. I could share my screen and display that to the defendants who were in court, and they used the big screen televisions in the courtroom to display my image. So the offenders could see me, I could see them, and we could interact even though I was required to quarantine. I feel that the use of technology is not only good in the courtroom, but it's been very helpful for law enforcement. I am going to save with you for my closing statement the things that I would like to see in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Rush.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Rush, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here and to hear us tonight. Before I begin, I would like to take a moment to thank the McMinn County Republican Party for putting on this debate. Of voting, Abraham Lincoln said this, that elections belong to the people. Dwight D. Eisenhower said the future of this republic is in the hands of the American voter. These statements are true today as they were when they were first uttered. As Todd said, I am a native Tennessean, born in Memphis, Tennessee, and raised in Shelby County, admittedly the flattest part of Tennessee. I first visited East Tennessee as a high school wrestler competing in Cleveland. I eventually moved to Knoxville, where I got reacquainted with East Tennessee, and attended and graduated from the University of Tennessee. I went to the nation's oldest law school at the College of William & Mary, and I graduated in 2004. I'm married to Tammy Crane, who's also a lawyer, and between us we have 4 children. For going on 18 years, I've worked on both sides of the courtroom to accomplish justice to the best of my abilities, and I will work to accomplish it if elected from the bench. There are 3 issues I want to raise in my opening statement. They are 1, the grand jury backlog, needless costly delays. 2, improving efficiency in the courtroom. And 3, fewer errors in rulings. First, the grand jury backlog. Why does the grand jury backlog matter? What is the grand jury? Simply put, the grand jury is a body of county citizens that will hear a criminal matter and will either send the case to criminal court or no bill the case, resulting in dismissal. Why does this matter to you? Why do you need to know this, and how does it affect you? You need to know this because delays in the grand jury result in delays getting a case up to trial in a timely fashion. In some cases, this is pre-COVID, so we can't blame the backlog on COVID. The state had held accused for up to and including 13 months on a case I had. At roughly $63 a day, a 13-month grand jury delay cost the taxpayers $24,570. There was one case that was ultimately dismissed. That's why I'm passionate about the backlog. You, the taxpayers, pay that. Let me put it this way. You've been paying for that inefficiency for years now. If I am elected, the common practice of costly delays in the grand jury will end. So too will the days of regularly working into evenings on criminal court days, We're talking about basic common courtesy here, folks. When criminal court goes into the evening, I've even been there when it's gone into the morning in Judge Donaghy's court. When criminal court goes into the evening on a regular basis, you end up with unhappy clerks, unhappy courtroom officers, unhappy victims, unhappy probation officers, unhappy lawyers, and unhappy defendants. Who does better work at 8:30 p.m. after a 12-hour day? Anybody? If elected, I will put an end to these days and promise to end court at a reasonable hour so that people can go to their kids' piano recitals, football games, band concerts, birthday dinners, track practice, church, and basically have a life outside of court. We can speed up court too, and if elected, courtesy toward others will be one of my main...
Sorry, you still have a minute and 30.
I saw her signal, but she was just brushing away her hair. We can speed up court too, and if elected, courtesy toward others will be one of my main priorities. I have the energy to do this the right way. I have the experience to do this the right way. And if I'm elected, I will be efficient and courteous in the performance of my duties. Thirdly, we have far too many errors in criminal court. A publicly available search of the Tennessee AOC court shows that Sandra Donaghy has reversible errors in an astoundingly high 22% of all her cases that were up on appeal. This is simply unacceptable. For comparison, Judge Freiberg, the other criminal court, has a 0% reversal rate. In fact, just last week, the Court of Criminal Appeals reversed Sandra Donaghy again because she failed to make simple findings of fact. These are basic things that she has done wrong. They are not complicated, they are not complex, and getting them wrong builds even more delays into a process that is already burdened by undue delays. What does that mean to you? Well, how many of you have applied for a job? In that interview, if you had told your employer, when you spot check my work, I'm going to be wrong about 22% of the time. Do you think you're going to get that job? If you have a 22% error rate, do you think you're going to get that job? Do you deserve that job? Doing a job right and being efficient the first time is a traditional conservative value. In short, I will be wrong about the law less often. I will follow the law. I will give the job my best. If you want to know if I have the ability to do these things, I ask you to take note of how I've been running my campaign with energy, passion, and a strong commitment to making sure that the law is honored. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now, these questions, to get some questions, we'll have to make these answers a little bit shorter than your opening statements, and we'll alternate back. We'll go first to the first question to you, and then the second question will go first to you, Mr. Rush. But both of you are former prosecutors. I was a criminal court judge in Knox County, but I had never been a prosecutor. In my time, everybody in Knoxville had a real general practice, wide experiences. Do you, what experiences have you had that you feel can make you be tough on crime, but also fair to the defendants who come before you? And a lot of the lawyers who do criminal defense work feel that former prosecutors, and most criminal court judges do come, some of them, many of them come from a background having never done anything except be prosecutors. So tell us what experiences you've had and how you would go about trying to be fair to both sides. What experiences do you have during your life that would help you be able to do that?
Thank you. I have served on all sides of the courtroom. When I first got licensed, I was in private practice for 8 years, and so I did civil work and public defender work. When I moved to Tennessee, I was lucky enough to be hired by Jerry Estes, and I started with the DA's office in 1992. I have been a prosecutor for 20 years. Sort of in the middle, my husband's career took us out of state, and I was a public defender in the Chicago area for 1 year. So I've done prosecution and defense work and civil work. The question was, how can I be fair? And I think not only have I seen the issues from all sides, which makes me fair, But if you look at the role of a prosecutor, the prosecutor is to guard the rights of the defendants, hold law enforcement accountable to the law and following the law in all they do, and then meting out a settlement that will properly resolve cases. I have done this virtually the last 30 years. If you look at the dispositions and the sentencing, I've already spoken to the effectiveness of the work, but in terms of being an ability to be fair to people, everyone who knows me will say I am a good listener, perhaps a good listener to a fault, but I understand that everybody's day in court is that day that they're there. And whether they like or dislike the decision or the final ramification of things, I want them to feel as though they were treated fairly and that they were heard. And I think that characteristic in my judicial temperament is something that enables me to be fair to everyone who comes before me.
Thank you. Mr. Rush.
Yes, thank you for the question. So the question, as I understand it, is how to be fair to defendants on both sides.
That's part of the question.
Part of the question is my experience has been as a prosecutor for 11 years and as a public defender for the last 6 going on 7 years. So I've seen both sides. I have a death penalty case now that I'm representing. I have another homicide, several homicides that I'm representing. So I've done the prosecution work, but I feel that the prosecution work helped me be a better defense lawyer. And I believe that having both sides of this for extensive numbers of years would build a fair platform that anyone could feel comfortable coming into my court. I don't believe that I would be biased or partial to one side or the other. A thing that I did notice when I looked at some of the reversals that I talked about earlier, I think last time I counted there were 10 that were sent back on reversals or vacated. And 9 of those were in favor of the state originally, and they were overturned. Only one of them, only 1 out of the 10 that were reversed were in favor of the defendant. So I put it to you, is that really a fair court? I will be a fair justice, a fair judge, a fair court, and people will be able to believe when they come in there that I have the experience that's going to allow me to be fair.
All right, thank you very much. Let's have it. I'll give you a hypothetical example that has happened many times across the state, a particular homicide case. Let's say that a young man, maybe in his early 20s, who's had a very clean record, did well in high school and college, but he went to a party and he got drunk and he killed somebody with his vehicle. He didn't mean to, so you have, what kinds of things would you have to take into consideration because you have a victim who's been killed by somebody who didn't mean to, but they got a little bit over the limit of drunk driving. Now, what types of things would you consider in that type of case, and what type of sentence would you impose in that kind of case? Very difficult kind of case.
Yes, it is a difficult kind of case, and it's the kind of case I've seen in our courts. I've prosecuted those cases, and I've defended those cases. I can tell you, without telling you what I would sentence the person to, I can tell you the factors that I would consider. The factors in rendering a sentence and delivering a sentence would be whether the person had been in any previous trouble, whether the person was amenable to corrections. I think vehicular homicide, though, I'm looking it up right now, and it is a...
It's a B felony.
It is by alcohol, by intoxication. It's a B felony. But I believe that it is a to serve sentence now. Am I correct on that? Yeah, I believe it's a 2-serve sentence now, but is it not? No. Okay. Well, there have been pushes for vehicular homicide to be mandatory minimum for whatever the DUI is, so you got that covered. If it's a DUI first, then you couldn't do anything less than 48 hours. That was a law that I tried to, as a prosecutor, that I proposed. If it was your second DUI offense, then you couldn't be anything, second vehicular, sorry, I'm a little nervous. If it's a second DUI or a second vehicular homicide, then it has to carry at least 45 days. And same for a third would be 120. Fourth would be 150. The sixth offense carries, sixth offense on a DUI carries between 3 to 6 years in prison or probation.
Well, thank you very much. Gotcha.
Thank you. That's a very difficult sort of situation because you have someone charged with a very serious crime and they didn't mean to do it, as you said, yet you have loss of life. And that's when the facts in the law have to be carefully weighed and meted out. Our sentencing guidelines not only define the range of punishment where someone must be sentenced within that time, within that range, but then the law allows the judge discretion to determine how much of that sentence should be served. And so the law requires that a variety of factors be considered. One of them is the facts of the offense, information learned at the time of the sentencing hearing. A pre-sentence investigative report would have to be prepared that talks about one's social history, past work experience, past convictions, drug and alcohol issues over time, whether or not they have military service, and whether or not restitution is being requested. The law also requires that we look at statistical information that is published by the Administrative Office of the Courts so that people who are sentenced here in East Tennessee are treated in parity or the same with someone who might be sentenced out of Memphis or Johnson City. So we've got to look at those factors. The victim's input has to be considered. Victims have constitutional rights to speak. And then it's by a careful weighing out, sifting, prayerfully considering that information, it becomes the judge's responsibility to render a sentence.
All right, thank you. We'll go back to you now. What is the most difficult case that you can think of that you've ever handled, either as a private lawyer or as a public defender or as a prosecutor, whatever? What is the most difficult, and what are the facts, and what was the outcome of that case?
Boy, during the course of my career, as a prosecutor, I tried 200 jury trials, and as a judge, I have tried 90 some cases with over 200 counts, and so there's a lot of cases.
But tell us one example of the facts of the case and what was the outcome. There has to be one case that you can think of.
Well, I've just thought of a case.
Okay.
The name, it's over with, and so, you know, the canons of ethics say that we cannot talk about any pending cases, and so I'm thinking of State versus Charles Overby. The facts of that case were the decedent, the man who was killed, was only 23 years old. He was in his yard working on his car, and a man who used methamphetamine for several days in a row actually stole a wildlife officer's car, came up to Tennessee, found a note from his children indicating that they had gone to a friend's house on Gibson Drive, and so the father went there to look for the children. But Rodney Drive and Gibson Drive are parallel. He turned onto Rodney Drive, came into this young man's driveway and said, "Where are my children?" And the victim said, "I don't know who you are. I don't know where your children are." And with that, he took the weapon, the duty weapon, from this wildlife officer's car and just shot him, killed him right there in his yard. That was a very difficult case because the victim felt very, very strongly that he should be prosecuted for first-degree murder. But there really was not enough evidence to go forward on a premeditated first-degree murder charge. It was a knowing killing. So first I had to explain to the mother that the punishment for a second-degree murder case, this was when I was a prosecutor, so I could talk to victims, but I had to explain why the kind of crime didn't put value on her child's death. Oh my goodness. But anyhow, the long and the short of it, that case was taken to trial. That mother was in court all the time. He was actually convicted. He remains confined. And that mother has become an advocate for victims' rights across the state because she has actually been there, understands, and empathized. I've spent a lot of time worrying about that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rush.
Yes, the case that stands out to me was as a prosecutor. I tried it was a very emotional and difficult case. It involved a young lady who was raped by a neighbor. She became pregnant by him, and we were trying to bring the full weight of what had occurred to the jury and to the court. And so I indicted it as an aggravated rape because there was a pregnancy involved, and we had to put her up on the witness stand, and we had several motions where she was distraught, and she wanted to keep the baby. She did keep the baby. We were able to get that baby DNA tested to show that the father was the defendant. And so she was very young at the time. So we were all very concerned about her keeping the child. Her mother ended up raising that child for her. But I just remember that being a particularly difficult case on everybody, including the victim in that case and the child.
All right. Well, my first year as judge, we tried 78 jury trials in my court alone. Now, in Knox County, the 3 criminal courts put together may try 30 jury trials. In other words, the judges in Knox County are trying maybe 10 or 12 jury trials a year at the most. In the civil court, judges are trying even fewer. What do you think? How important is it that you think the jury trial is to the American system of justice? It seems to me, for instance, when I was in practice, almost all the trials were one-day trials, and we were trying cases right away. Now I think many lawyers under 50 are scared to go to trial because they never do it. So what is your opinion about the role of the jury trial in the American system of justice?
The role of the jury trial in the American system of justice is extremely important. It remains there. When I first came to this job, when I came to the job as a prosecutor, well, let me just back up. When I graduated law school, I remember us lining up, and they all said, we were all talking about where we're going to work and all this stuff, and everybody asked me, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? I said, I don't know, I just don't want to do trial law. And as it turned out, my first job was as a trial lawyer. I loved it. I did, in my time as a prosecutor, I did 90-something jury trials in this district, in the 10th Judicial District. Right now, there seems to, with COVID, of course, there's been a lull in the prosecution of cases that are out of custody, especially because of the rules that the Supreme Court put down. I believe that the jury trial is essential. The jury trial stands as a backstop to the plea bargain. If you don't want to take your plea bargain, you can always go to a jury trial, or you can plead open and have a sentencing hearing. And the availability of that is crucial, and I do understand your concerns, and I do agree with you that there's been a tremendous shift in the younger generation of lawyers coming up, that we don't see the courts rolling like they used to roll every day, every week, you know, in every court. Now we do more plea bargains and settlements.
Jury trials are guaranteed to every accused as a part of the Constitution. And so if someone wants a jury trial, they ought to have a jury trial. Right now, as a result of that COVID backlog, I have trials scheduled 5 and 6 deep on each of the trial days available to me. But if someone wants a trial, they ought to have had a trial. In the course of my work experience, I've seen changes in how cases are prepared and litigated. When I first started, I remember a case file was about this thick. Now, case files are this thick, and if you're talking about capital murder cases, they are boxes. So there's a lot more pretrial litigation and motion hearings and things like that, but the jurors are the finders of fact. And so if somebody wants a trial, they ought to have a trial. Our Constitution guarantees it.
Okay. All right. 16 cities this year broke their all-time records on murders. Philadelphia, for instance, had 561 murders this past year. How do you feel that, and I will tell you this, for my first several years in Congress, I was the only member of Congress who had ever sentenced anybody to the electric chair. What is your feeling about the death penalty? And secondly, in my 7.5 years as judge, I went through over 10,000 cases, and every single day I would read, defendant's father left home to get a pack of cigarettes and never came back. Defendant's father left home, defendant was due and never returned. I saw that almost the whole crime problem in felony criminal cases, and I know many wonderful people that come from father-absent households, but I also know that that's a major factor in a major source of our crime problems. So, death penalty, and then secondly, what can you do as judge to spread the message that the breakdown of the American family is behind or a big source of the crimes in this country? So it's sort of a double question.
Sure. Let me start with the second part of it first. I agree that breakdown of the family unit and good character values are the source of crimes in most every aspect, murder or burglary, theft, drug use. And so I don't know that a judge has the power and certainly not the venue to actually preach those things. But I also think that in every sentence that is meted out, we can reinforce and try to support families. When people are facing difficulties, we can encourage, we can get resources for them. And then we need to be encouraging our young people to get an education, because I think whether you're raised by a single parent or in a 2-parent household, education and a hard work ethic are what will pull you out of it. Flipping to the second part of your question, which is actually the first about the death penalty. I have actually tried 3 death penalty cases myself. As a judge, I've not had a death penalty case put before me, but I have had 2 or 3 life without the possibility of parole. There is a place for the death penalty in our law. Every murder is bad, and every murder is cruel, and every loss of life is terrible. But there are some crimes that are so heinous that really there is no answer but for the death penalty. When the death penalty is imposed, There's no backing up from it. You can't undo something that has been done. And so in that case, the last death penalty case that I tried as a prosecutor, there were 300 pretrial motions filed. And I think that is very appropriate. I think every piece of evidence should be examined from every side, turned over, re-examined, applied to the law, so that if that decision is made, everybody from the trial court level, the jury, all of the appellate reviews that are allowed, that everybody says the law was followed, the punishment is correct.
All right. Mr. Rush.
The death penalty is part of our law in Tennessee. I've pursued the death penalty as a prosecutor. I'm defending one now as a defense lawyer. As a judge, I agree with Judge Donaghy. There is a proper place for the death penalty, but it should be reserved for the most heinous either offenders or circumstances. And so I wouldn't do this job if I didn't believe I could do it. I wouldn't do what I do as a public defender if I didn't believe in the laws of our land. So I believe that there is absolutely a place for the death penalty in Tennessee.
All right, and there's a second part. Is there anything you could do as judge to help encourage families to stay together?
Yes, one of the things that we do, that I do, particularly, Judge Donaghy has a rock stockett program, recovery-oriented compliance strategies, and I'm involved in the 10th Judicial Drug Court, and so we deal with a lot of the dissolving of the families that has already happened, and we get them on drug court. They're often estranged from family members or have very bad relationships with their family members, worse than they were when they were on drugs, or when they weren't. So what we do is we work with them over 18 months, and we try to encourage them to do what they can. Make the connections that they can make, if it's positive, if it's benefiting them, if it's productive, if it helps them stay off drugs. We try to encourage those to build those relationships. We have graduation ceremonies where we bring the kids to court, and everybody enjoys the fellowship and the food and the accomplishments, and we try to take that opportunity to lavish praise on them. So those are my feelings.
All right, well, thank you very much. To me, this has been very interesting, but I like this kind of stuff, but we've got to keep this moving. We've got to keep get the attorneys, the district attorney candidates up here. So each of you have now 3 minutes to make a closing statement to the people who have been nice enough to come out here tonight. And let's see. Ms. Donahue, you went first on the opening statements, I believe, and so we'll let Mr. Rush go first on the closing statement. So, Mr. Rush, you can begin your closing statement to the people of this district.
Thank you very much. You said a 3-minute close?
3 minutes.
These documents are the grand jury backlog. They are publicly available to you. You can see that some of these people have been indicted or not indicted. Nothing's been done with them for years, and they're sitting in the jail or sitting waiting to be indicted. This has to stop. This cannot continue. It's in every county. It's in Monroe, it's in McMinn, it's in Bradley, it's in Polk, and it was there before COVID, and it hasn't gotten any better. It's gotten worse with COVID, so we have to take extraordinary steps, I believe, to get us back on track and back where we were. COVID has done some good things for us, and I'd like to point those out. I'd like to echo what Judge Donaghy said about the technology. The mother of necessity, invention is the mother of necessity, is that what they say? So What we've been seeing is that we can get people in and out of court faster on the video monitor than we could in person, especially when they were incarcerated, because they would have to come up from the jail and then sit in the courtroom and be guarded. So
Let me tell you, this is very interesting to me, but these are the people you need to convince.
Oh,
So talk to
let me
the
talk
audience
to them.
out here.
All right. You
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Give me just a little more time since I interrupted you.
Guys, I don't know what to do about this. These are all reversed cases from Judge Donahue's court. All of these, all reversals. That means there were error in every one of these cases. Reversible error. That means these cases had to be done again. In some cases, the convictions were vacated. In some cases, they were convicted of lesser included offenses. But these are all reversals, and this can't happen. This is unacceptable. If nobody else will do anything, then I will stand up and I will be recognized and I will do the job. If nobody else will do it, then I will represent our attorneys, I will represent the people, and I will do my best to bring justice to the 10th Judicial District. Fair, impartial justice. Thank you.
I'd like to start out talking about the grand jury backlog he's been talking about. Quite frankly, there is a backlog, but the criminal court judge has no control over that. Once a case is bound over from the Sessions Court, it is squarely in the lap of the grand jury, and the only issue that the criminal court judge can deal with is a request for bond. That is a district attorney issue. The criminal court judge has no control. I've been dying to answer on this, the reversals that he talks about. I think he is being less than genuine when he portrays the information as he did. Well, thank you, Mr. Rush. 62 of my cases have gone up on appeal, 53 of them have been affirmed, and 9 of them have been sent back for further action. But it's not a retrial, it's not starting the whole thing over, it's correcting little things like I said restitution. Restitution is money that is owed to a victim because of the crime that was committed to them. If they caused $10,000 worth of damage, I think the perpetrator ought to pay $10,000, and that was my order. Well, the Court of Criminal Appeals said the damage might have been $10,000, but this person cannot afford to pay that. So I was to hold another hearing to figure out how much money the defendant could pay, and let's say $50 a month for a 3-year sentence, so whatever $50 times 3 years times 12 months in a year, that's what the restitution is being set for. So I have been overturned for guarding the rights of victims. I've been overturned because the Court of Appeals said that I sentenced too harshly. Every single case that I work on, I try to do the best that I can. I strive for perfection, but I'm only human, and I'm going to make a mistake. But to suggest that it is such a high percentage and that it's evidence of some flaw is disingenuous. I also want to point out that if you look at the entire of my caseload, I've disposed of 7,700 cases, and 9 cases out of that is less than 0.1%. That means I am right 99.9% of the time.
10 seconds.
Thank you. And in terms of keeping people late, sometimes you just got to put your head down and work through the issues. One time I did keep a group there until after midnight, but I asked the parties if I could, and they wanted to go forward and finish it. So it's unfair to people who have been waiting to have their case heard all day to say, miss another day's work, get child care, do whatever else, and come back on another day. And it's not just tomorrow when they have to come back, it's a month, because we have to share the courtrooms.
Okay, well, I want to thank both of these candidates for doing such a wonderful job for speaking to each of you. Let's give them both a round of applause. Now, while the candidates for District Attorney General will come forward, I'll tell you, when I was a judge, the attempted murder of James Earl Ray was transferred into my court. I tried that case, but I will tell you about the case that surprised me the most. There was a double attempted murder case in Knox County where a man named Gary Lidner and Kenneth Ezell from Lamar City went into business together, real estate business, and then Gary Lidner told Kenneth Ezell he was the president, that Gary was the president of the Knoxville Gospel Music Association, and Mr. Lidner told Mr. Ezell that he had some real estate customers coming by the real estate office that night. Would he cover the customers? And Kenneth Ezell went there that night and was beaten to the pulp so badly that his best friend Joe Sims, who was the sheriff of Loudoun County, didn't even recognize him. He spent 2 months in Park West Hospital, and then word got out that he was starting to recover. And then Gary Lidner, the defendant, was seen leaving Kenneth Ezell's room at the Park West Hospital. And a couple minutes later, the nurse in Mr. Ezell's room got a call from Dr. So-and-so and said, be sure to tell Mr. Lidner to take his medicine and to come by the bed. He took that medicine, quote medicine, and it was poison. And twice, Kenneth Ezell came as close to death as you could do it without passing the bar, without passing over. And yet that case surprised me the most because the defendant, Mr. Lidner, was found not guilty in that case. And the main reason was the main witnesses against him were a striptease dancer from Greenville, Georgia, and a person who had a long criminal record. So that case became the main teaching case at the District Attorney's School at the University of Houston for several years. So I'm interested to hear from these candidates for District Attorney General, and I know you all are too. You've got the introductions for the two candidates.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Stephen Hatchett was born in Polk County, grew up in Monroe County, worked as a prosecutor in Bradley County, and lives in Riceville in McMinn County with his wife Rachel and 8-year-old daughter Isabella. Stephen graduated from East Tennessee State University with a bachelor's in criminology that included coursework in criminal theory, forensic science, counterterrorism, statistical analysis, and police procedure. He graduated from UT College of Law in 2006 and was hired as an assistant district attorney by District Attorney General Jerry Estes and assigned to the Cleveland office. He is currently in private practice in Athens. He is a member of the Tennessee Bar Association, the Monroe County Bar Association, and the McMinn Meigs County Bar Association. Stephen Hatchett. Steve Crump was born in Bradley County and attended Bradley County Central High School. He then attended Carson Newman University. He attended the University of Tennessee and obtained his law degree. Steve was hired by former District Attorney Jerry Estes as an assistant district attorney and served in the Cleveland office. He was named team leader and handled numerous high-profile and difficult cases during his time in office. Steve was appointed District Attorney by Governor Bill Haslam and then elected in 2014. As District Attorney, Steve has served as the legislative chairman for Tennessee's District Attorney. He advises the General Assembly on public safety matters. He also teaches trial advocacy to young prosecutors and serves on the faculty of new prosecutors course. He belongs to the Cleveland Rotary Club and is a member of First Baptist Church.
All right, we'll do the same as we did with the judges, we'll go in alphabetical order, and Mr. Garner, that means that you can go first, and each of us will have 3 to 5 minutes to tell about yourself and why you want to be Attorney General and how you feel you can help the citizens of this judicial district. Mr. Garner.
Thank you so much. I want to thank Todd for putting this on. I also want to thank Congressman Duncan for being here. Leah, thank you so much for keeping time for us and keeping us straight. I want to thank each of you for coming out on a bad night, weather-wise, but a great night for this community. Democracy in our republic is based upon the fact that we have people who spend their time learning not just about their government, but about the people who want to run it. There is no more important job that you will vote for in this election than the office of the District Attorney General. It is the most powerful office in Tennessee. That is not my word. That is not what I say. That is what our courts have said. Each day I have recognized the power of that office and sought to do justice in this community. I have done it by practicing 6 simple words that hang outside the door of my office. Those 6 simple words are do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. Each of those words have not just informed every day, but have served as a checklist for me on the way in the door, and have served as a grade card for me every day when I turn off the lights and I go home. To do justly means that we are to hold criminals accountable as necessary under the law. Those who cannot follow our law must be dealt with and must be held in a way that is not just humane, but also encourages them and demands from them accountability and to act in a way that is comparable with our society. It means taking hard cases and trying them to juries. It means long sentences, but it also means protecting the innocent. It means looking at a case and determining whether or not someone should actually be prosecuted, because that is as much of our job to protect innocence as is prosecuting and pursuing the guilty. To love mercy starts with victims. It ends with victims. Victims are the most forgotten class of people in our country. It doesn't matter where you go, you hear talk about criminals and how they must be helped, and we must do this for them and we must do that for them. You never hear that for our victims. Doing justly is important, but just as important is loving mercy, and that starts with our victims. But it doesn't end there. There are addicts in our community, addicts that must be dealt with in a way different than more than regular criminals. That's why I helped Judge Donaghy create a veterans court for our criminal court system. That's why I helped Judge Freiberg double the size of our recovery court. All of this coming together means that offenders will be held accountable. Since I came into office, we have put more than 4 times the number of drug dealers in prison than Hamilton County and Chattanooga, despite the fact that they have 125,000 more people. I instituted mandatory jail time for burglary cases, for violent cases, and for drug cases. All of that is great, but none of it works if you don't walk humbly. Walking humbly means that you understand your limitations as a mere mortal. It means that you understand the immense power of your office to ruin the lives of other people if you don't do your job correctly or through a careless accusation. The power of the office requires someone who walks humbly. Walking humbly means that you, even though you may not agree with someone, you continue to work with them. It means every day you get up and you remember that the public pays your salary, and you're going to smile on days that you don't feel good, because ultimately they are the ones that you are serving. Walking humbly may be the last of those 6 words, but they are the most important of those 6 words. For the last 8 years, I have guarded your community. I'm asking you to let me guard this community again for another 8 years, and I'm proud to ask you for your vote as your district attorney. Thank you all.
Well, thank you, Mr. Crump. That Micah 6:8 was my grandfather's favorite Bible verse, Papa Duncan. And anyway, Mr. Hatchett, tell the people why you want to be District Attorney General and why and how you think you can improve the office over there.
Yes, sir. First of all, I want to say thank you to the McMinn County Republican Party. Todd Watson's done a fine job putting this on. The weather didn't really cooperate that much, but we're all here. I'm tickled to death to see Congressman Duncan. I told him before we got in here, when I was a kid, we had kindergarten graduation at Coker Creek Elementary School, and we invited Congressman Duncan, and we looked over there, and lo and behold, there sat Congressman Duncan. I think it's important when someone runs, especially in a Republican primary, that they draw a distinction between who they're running against. And in order to draw that distinction, I need to talk about two things. First of all, we need to talk about the crime rate. From 2007 to 2014, crime in the 10th Judicial District was dropping. 2014, the crime rate went up. 2014 is when the current district attorney took office. From 2014 to 2018, crime increased 22%. Now, why am I talking about 2018? I'm talking about 2018 for a very simple reason. I want to read something to you folks from February 15, 2018. I have loved taking pictures since I was a child. I have been late to appointments because I stopped to take a picture, but I was only snapping pictures. About a year and a half ago, I got serious about being a photographer. I started studying the science of it. I began to study the great photographers. In short, I stopped taking snapshots and began really taking photographs. That was the genesis of this website. That website is Steve Crump's photography business. Okay? The General's Lens Photography. I studied crime. I didn't study taking pictures. I don't care anything about taking pictures. 2014 to 2018, while he is out learning to take pictures, crime is going up. What else is going on in the 10th Judicial District? How about this article from the Chattanooga Times, February 2nd, 2016, triple slaying suspect won't face death penalty because of scheduling problems. A Polk County, Tennessee man charged in an August 2012 triple slaying won't face the death penalty after scheduling problems in the 10th Judicial District Attorney's Office led to the withdrawal last week of the death penalty notice. Judge Sandra Donahue, wherever she went, ordered the District Attorney's Office to show cause why they should not be held in contempt of court for failing to respond to pleadings. How about this article? Monroe County Advocate, August 27, 2017. Judge writes state botched murder trial. How about this article from the Daily Wire, one of the biggest conservative news outlets in the nation. He spent 3 years in jail for a false accusation of rape, and now he's finally free. What else was going on in the 10th Judicial District while the district attorney was learning the science of pictures? Monroe County, where I'm from, 2014 to 2018, the Monroe County Sheriff's Office reported a 75% increase in violent crime. Through 2020, the violent crime rate in Monroe County through the Monroe County Sheriff's Office is 137.5% increase. 137.5%. That's not guarding the community, folks. I would have loved to have stayed in private practice. I like private practice, but I can't let this go on. We need a new district attorney. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Hanson, we'll let you go first on this
Yes, sir.
question. I always said, I worked all the way through high school and college, had jobs as a groundskeeper at a baseball park, a bag boy at a grocery store, a salesman at Sears for my first 2 years at UT, and a newspaper reporter at the Knoxville Journal, and later on in my years at UT. Anyway, I taught school for a year, and I was going to law school. I always thought all those jobs that I had prior to going to law school would help me later on. What kinds of experiences have you had, both before you went to law school and then since you became a lawyer, that you think would help you to know how to deal with people and so forth, and would make
Well, you know, I'll tell you, Congressman, you know this, and any of you folks that's ever dealt with lawyers, even if you don't want to admit it, you're too polite to admit it, lawyers tend to talk down to people. And that's just a fact. So I really appreciate that question, Congressman. I started working in a sawmill when I was 14 years old. I worked 2 summers on the Mayfield milk docks here in Athens. I've worked on a logging crew. I have worked on construction. I've worked with just about any kind of person that you can imagine. And one thing that I've learned, among many things, is nobody's better than anybody else. When I deal with people as a lawyer, I try to talk to them the way that I would want them to talk to me. Because one thing about being from Monroe County is if you talk down to somebody, you might just get punched in the nose, right? So to your question, Congressman, the jobs that I've had primarily has been blue collar. My dad can barely read and write. He was a construction worker. His son's a lawyer. So I don't look down on anybody. I don't talk down to anybody. I treat everybody as they have intrinsic worth, and as district attorney, I will do the same thing.
All right, Mr. Crump, same question to you. What jobs, so forth, what experiences have you had even before you became district attorney general, and experiences you had after you became a lawyer?
My first job was mowing my 6th grade teacher's yard. And my father was either convinced that I still had too much time on my hands or that I was a remarkable mower, because he arranged for me to have several more. Experiences that I have had, I don't think you can connect them just to one area of your life that make you suitable, not just for public office, but to be a lawyer in general. The first experience, and it's one that I don't want to dwell on because I don't think that this needs to be made too much of, but my first one was when I was saved. It allowed me to learn first that there was redemption. It allowed me to learn that despite the fact that I may mess up and people I know might mess up, it was made right by someone other than me. It made me humble because it reminded me that I did nothing on my own, and it made sure that I was constantly reminded that I had a greater responsibility than myself. When I went to college, I was an only child. I didn't have brothers and sisters, and the first gift that my parents gave me was a camera. So I'm not going to run away from the fact that I love to take photographs. And I'm going to say that not a single day, not a single moment have I ever shirked my duty as district attorney for anything, much less a camera. And I defy anyone to say that that's true. But lastly, the thing that made me, I think one of the things that made me a good candidate, and I think a good district attorney. My father died when I was in law school. I had accepted a job in a firm in Knoxville, but as an only child, I came home to take care of my mother. And I did that until she died in 2014, just before I was sworn in. I think the thing that if you look back over my life and you talk to the people who know me, and I think it's important you talk to people who know both of us, because we can get up here and tell you anything.
30 seconds.
We can get up here and tell you anything about ourselves or about each other. Talk to the people who really know us and ask them whether or not what we're telling you is true. And at the end of the day, caring for other people is what made me what I am today.
All right. Similar question to what I asked the judges. Tell me about the case in your career, either in law practice or as district attorney, either one. What case was your most difficult case, or what was the case you were the most proud of, or what was it with the facts of that case and the outcome?
The case that I think was not just the hardest, but the one that made the most difference is a case from here in McMinn County. It's the case of Robert Wilson. Robert Wilson was a 19-year-old young man who brutally raped and murdered an 18-year-old woman in Etowah. That case was difficult not just because the facts were horrific. The facts were nothing that you wanted to read. It was nothing that you could imagine doing yourself. But it was hard because my daughters were roughly the same age. I imagine the loss of that family. I imagine the loss of that community. Etowah, you all know this who live here, it's a tight-knit community. It was hard also because not only had we lost an 18-year-old young woman, but we were about to lose a 19-year-old young man. His life would be forever confined. His life would be changed, and he would always be remembered as the young man who did the horrible acts he did. I tried that case along with 2 other lawyers in my office, and while I've had more difficult cases legally and technically, I've had cases that were more difficult from an analytical perspective. I've never had a case that affected me so personally as State of Tennessee versus Robert Wilson.
All right. Thank you very much. Same question to Mr. Hatchett.
Yes, sir. I've had a lot of cases that are hard, but one of the hardest cases that I handled was actually a defense case. I defended a husband and wife in the last 2-3 years that were accused of theft. These people had never been in trouble a day in their life. They were people who gave back to their community. They were people who were genuinely good people. And they were accused of stealing by this district attorney's office. And when I asked the prosecuting officer, who's a good guy, I said, I can't seem to find this entity, this business entity that they supposedly stole from. And he said, yeah, I'm a little fuzzy on that myself, but the DA's office told me to prosecute him. Those people had their lives ruined. They had their reputations destroyed. Their innocence was not protected. Ultimately, the DA's office, I made them dismiss it. I litigated that case until they finally had to say, we give. But that's not protecting innocence. That was a hard case, Congressman. Thank you.
All right. All right, there's a rich communist named George Soros who has spent many mega billions to elect soft crime district attorneys across the nation. What is your reaction to that, and what is your reaction when you see on television, you see all these smash and grab crimes going on in some of these fancy stores, and how that some prosecutors around the country are not prosecuting marijuana violations or shoplifting violations because while the law enforcement says marijuana has been a gateway drug to people start on marijuana in the 7th grade, go to cocaine in the 9th grade, heroin in the 10th grade, and they do this, they start this shoplifting, and then they graduate to the police say other crimes. What is your reaction when you see all that going on all around the country?
Well, if you don't have justice, then you have anarchy and you have chaos. And as far as George Soros is concerned, George Soros is interested in power through chaos, all right? And that's the only reason that he's funding district attorneys across the country. Crime is a complex thing, all right? You have a wide variety of theories about why crime occurs. Now, certain things are fairly static when it comes to crime, socioeconomic factors, marital status. To your question, Congressman, about single-family or single-parent homes. What you have to have across this nation is district attorneys that respect the rule of law, okay? Your right to swing your arm ends where the other person's nose begins. And that's what is lacking in these cities when you see people going out and being allowed to smash and grab, when you see people being allowed to go out and commit crimes, they're being allowed to take from other people. And if we're allowed to just take from other people, then there is no rule of law. And if there's no rule of law, then we're back to the law of the jungle. It's the survival of the fittest. Might makes right. So for any district attorney, whether it's here or anywhere else, you have to enforce the rule of law. You have to enforce it fairly. You have to enforce it equally. You have to apply individualized justice. Cookie cutter justice doesn't work. You have to focus on the offenders. Most of what you're talking about, Congressman, it has no place in civilized society, and it really has no, there's nothing to compare it to for the purposes of this conversation. We don't do that here. We don't behave that way here. We don't recognize the ideals and the principles that give rise to that here. So that would be my response, Congressman.
All right, thank you. Mr. Crown?
Well, I'll start by saying George Soros doesn't live in Tennessee, and he, to my knowledge, has not funded any candidate for district attorney in Tennessee. I have not and will not accept any money from outside the state of Tennessee. I don't know if I can say that for the other candidates in any of these other races, but I have never refused to enforce a single law passed by the General Assembly. However, when I believed that Governor Lee's executive orders exceeded the bounds of the Constitution, when I looked at it and I said, it does not make sense for a man who cuts hair in Von Orr to be cited as a criminal, but a man who lives in Von Orr and drives to Knoxville gets to earn a living, that's not America, that's not Tennessee, and that's certainly not constitutional under any reading. I've never failed to enforce any law of this state, except that once. And I will pledge to you now that if there are any other laws like that, that are in fact outside the bounds of the Constitution, I will never forget my oath and enforce them simply because the General Assembly says I should or because the governor says I must.
Thank you very much. Aren't you heard me ask the judges something like this? I can tell you that many people say they're in favor of the death penalty, but it's very difficult to get a jury to actually impose a death sentence.
Yes, sir.
How do you feel about that? And what do you feel about the death penalty in general?
I am the only candidate for district attorney who has sentenced and seen sentenced a man for death. I'm the only candidate on this stage who stood in front of a jury of 12 people and asked them to put one of our fellow citizens to death, and they agreed with me. It is the most significant and weighty issue that a prosecutor will ever undertake. Every other decision that you make can be cured in one way or another. Maybe not completely, but it can be. When you ask for someone's life and it's granted to you, there is no way to undo that. As I stood in front of that jury and as I told them about the reasons they should, I go back to my previous question. I thought about my faith. What about redemption? What about forgiveness? And I was reminded that Christ did not save the thief from the cross. There was still a crime, there was still a penalty that was owed to Rome. And I was reminded that my faith is not about this earth. It's about a different place and in a different context. The death penalty should be enforced. I currently have 3 death penalty cases pending in this district. I've tried another death penalty case here in McMinn County, State versus Odom, and the jury came back with life without parole. The jurors indicated to us that because I could not put the gun in the man's hand as the shooter between the two, that they would not impose the death penalty. If we stop enforcing the death penalty, then we have taken a great, not just tool, but a great reminder to our citizens of the sanctity and the importance of human life.
Yes, sir. This is one of the differences between myself and the current district attorney. Not that I don't believe in the death penalty, but if you actually look at the death penalty, you know that it is a complicated issue, and in fact, whether or not it is a useful tool is a much longer conversation than 3 minutes on a stage. But you have to know crime to know that. Does the death penalty serve a purpose? Yes, because there are people in this world that are so mean, they just don't need to be here. Can you score political points talking about the death penalty? Absolutely. Funny story. If you look at the research on the death penalty, back when people were getting hung left and right, what the research showed was the death penalty actually caused more crimes and violence. Now, I say that to you because of this. When you weigh the death penalty, you have to weigh all of it. You have to weigh that there is a brutalization effect. Feel free to look it up. You have to weigh that there are societal costs for having the government into life. And that cost-benefit analysis is important. So, do I support the death penalty? Yeah, because I know people that are just that mean. Is the death penalty the way we currently do it functioning? No, it's not. Can it be better? Yeah, but you know what you gotta have? I'll tell you real quick. How much time I got left?
1 minute, 15 seconds.
All right, I've done pretty good on my time. I usually don't. Here's what you need. If you want an effective death penalty, you need to remove absolute immunity from prosecutors. You need to be able to sue prosecutors the same way you sue any other government official that wrongs you. Prosecutors should have qualified immunity. Glenn Reynolds is one of my professors at the University of Tennessee, renowned legal scholar. He wrote about it about 5 years ago and said it's time for prosecutors to have skin in the game. If you're going to have the death penalty, you should be able to go after prosecutors that put innocent people on death row. Thank you.
Let me ask you this, some of many of the defendants in the January 6th event at the U.S. Capitol are being held without bond, where we've let murderers and rapists throughout the country be let out on bail. So, do you feel that, how do you feel about, is bail reform needed in this state? And of course, in some of these big cities, they've even gone to no bail laws. So, and I was going to ask you as a part of that, is there any specific part of the criminal law that you think needs reform right now? Of course, you sort of answered that about the immunity for district attorneys, but is there some other part of the criminal law that you feel is needed for reform? So that's 2 or 3 questions all at once there, please.
Well, as far as bail goes, so you have to remember that the purpose of bail is to ensure that someone is going to show up for court. That's the primary purpose. And then number 2 is to protect the community. You can never lose sight of the fact that a person is innocent until proven guilty. Now, that doesn't get talked about a whole lot in our society, but it's true. Not every person that's accused of a crime did it. So, bail has a purpose. Bail has existed since who knows how long, a very long time, all the way back to England, the common law. So, when you talk about bail reform, one of the things that I always point to, and one of the things that I always look at is, are people looking to see who is committing crimes and putting them back in jail if they are? And that's the District Attorney General's office. So that's part of the bail system. If someone is out on bail and they've committed a new crime, there needs to be a motion filed to revoke their bail immediately. So bail reform, one of the things that people are talking about is doing away with bail bondsmen. And I leave that for the bail bond industry. They can fight their own fight. We have to have some way to protect innocent until proven guilty. So to the January 6th question though, we all know that's a political prosecution, right? We all know that. We all know that. So they're being held, in my opinion, to coerce pleas. Okay? That's why they're in there. The government has I believe, a weak case against them, so they're holding them to try to get pleas out of them. So the January 6th incident, I would submit to you, Congressman, is really a different animal than we have here. As far as something that we can do now in our criminal law, we have to start taking a common sense approach to crime. We have to get back to focusing on the issues that matter and not just 30-second sound bites. We've got to start looking at a lot of what's coming out of the legislature right now. If you've not looked at it, I would suggest you do. How long I got?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. You should look at it, okay? Because a lot of it doesn't make any sense. I don't know that there's any one thing I would point to right now that I would change. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, same question.
Thank you. I'm going to start with the bail question. The pandemic taught us a lot about bail. The four sheriffs in this district came to me and said, we need to reduce the population of our jails because COVID, if it gets in here, we could literally have no place to put anybody. And so we need some help. We need to figure out what we're going to do. I sat down with them. We took lists from every jail. We went through all of the offenders that were not felony offenders, and we reduced the jail population by approximately half. We found no significant recidivism issue from that group that we let out. We have seen people, we've seen that the sheriffs were able to maintain that. We see Kentucky, who has completely revised their bail situation, and it has become a disaster. We've seen cities like New York City who have revised theirs. I think we have to be extremely careful when we talk about bail reform. We certainly should set bails, and I have one general sessions judge who absolutely refuses to hold somebody in jail if they, and it's not Judge Richardson who is here, I have one general sessions judge who refuses to hold somebody if they commit another felony while they're on bond. He'll simply set another bond and let them go again. We filed motion after motion after motion to revoke bonds, and they're ignored by that judge. It's not Judge Donaghy, it's not Judge Freiberg either, it's a general sessions judge. As to your question about January 6th, any time that someone is held for a political purpose, it is wrong. It is an abject abuse of the prosecution's power, and every prosecutor involved in that should be disciplined. And I don't mean they should be sued, I mean they should be prosecuted themselves. As to what I would change, we've got to stop lying to the people of this state in the criminal justice area. We need truth in sentencing. If somebody gets a 10-year sentence, they ought to serve 10 years. Not now, we say to them, hey, you've got a 10-year sentence and the parole board will decide when you get out. Well, I'm telling you, a 10-year sentence in this state can mean 18 months. You want to change, you want to lower crime, I don't have to have a degree. It's just like my children. When I told them there was a punishment, if I didn't make them live up to that punishment, they'd commit another offense. Criminals are no different. When we stop lying to the people, when we start holding offenders and we keep them in jail for the whole amount of time that they've been sentenced to by a judge or a jury, then we'll see the crime rate drop in this state.
Well, both of these gentlemen have done a great job, and I want to, I know each of them want a chance to visit with most many of you who are here, so we'll now give each candidate a 3-minute closing chance or opportunity, and Mr. Hatchett, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Congressman. I truly appreciate every person that's here. I truly appreciate every person that's watching on the live stream. I want to tell you just briefly what I intend to do as district attorney. You heard Mr. Rush talking about the backlog. We're going to clean that up. The long hours in court, if you're a deputy clerk, if you're a circuit court clerk, I'm here to tell you the long evenings are going to end. If you're a law enforcement officer, not having any input on cases is going to stop. You're going to have input on your cases. When you call up the district attorney's office and you say, hey, this person is a bad person, the district attorney's office, my office, is going to listen to you. We're not going to have trials simply for the sake of trials. If a case goes to trial, it's going to trial because it needs to go to trial. And if it goes to trial, I expect a conviction. In Bradley County in fiscal year 2018-2019, there was a 0% conviction rate after trial. I asked the administrative office of the courts for their numbers. In McMinn County in fiscal year 2018-2019, 0% conviction rate after trial. McMinn County fiscal year 2019-2020, 0% conviction rate after trial. Polk County fiscal year 2016-2017, 0% conviction rate after trial. Fiscal year 2019-2020, 0% conviction rate after trial. That's not going to happen in my office. Veterans Court. If you're a veteran, we're going to take into consideration your service to this country. I represented a young man, did 3 combat tours. His back and his knees were shot to pieces. He got charged with a crime directly related to his service to this country. And when I went to the district attorney's office and said, hey, this young man's a veteran, they said, we don't care. It's not right, and it's not going to happen. We're going to fix that. We're going to get involved in the Veterans Court. I was invited to the Veterans Court graduation in Monroe County. I went. Not a single person from the district attorney's office was there. You can't say you support the veterans if you don't show up for their graduation from Veterans Court. All of that's going to change. What I said to you folks is the truth. The only thing I care about is keeping you all safe. You, your loved ones, that's it. I don't care about political climbing. I see I've done good with time and now I'm getting cut off. I don't care about political climbing. I don't care about any part of that. I have an 8-year-old daughter and I want her growing up in a safe community, and that's what I want for all of you. Thank you very much for listening to me.
I tried a jury case in 2017 to a conviction. His numbers are wrong. I tried a jury case in 2018 to a conviction. His numbers are wrong. I tried a jury trial in 2019 to a conviction. His numbers are wrong. How do I know? I don't have to go to the administrative office of the courts. Those numbers are not accurate. I know because I lived them. I actually tried jury cases during those times. Let me say this as well. When I came into office in 2014, the rate of conviction in a jury trial for the office was 44%. That rate is now 88%. And if you want to see the real numbers, come to my office. Unlike the previous administration, I keep records on myself. I'm accountable to you. You want to see what those numbers really are? Come see them. We hand count them every day. Doing justice, loving mercy, walking humbly. I'm not here to tell you we got everything right. I'm not here to tell you that we are somehow perfect. What I'm here to tell you is every day my team and I worked to keep you safer. You really think that it's not safer here with 4 times the number of drug dealers out of this community than left Chattanooga? You honestly think that requiring 180 days jail on a burglary or 180 days for selling drugs or the same for a violent crime makes you less safe? I encourage you to listen to the details that you've heard tonight. What are the actual plans? What are the actual accomplishments? Or is it just language? Is it just something you can read in a book at school? I didn't study crime in college. I studied it as an assistant DA. I studied it every day for the last 8 years. I don't need a book to tell me that drugs are killing this community. I don't need a book to tell me that lying to the people about a sentence is ruining our justice system. I don't need books because it's what I do. And it's what I've done for the last 8 years. Every day I've gotten up and I've looked at those 6 words and I've asked God to help me keep this community safer. And by His hand and through His grace, I have. I appreciate you being here today. I appreciate you listening to us. And I look very much forward to talking to each of you and earning your vote again as district attorney. Thank you.
All right, well, before we close, I want to say that I commend each of these 4 candidates who come before you tonight. And I can't resist telling you one last story because it happened right here in Inglewood. Years ago, about 22 years ago, I was asked to speak to the First Baptist Church of Alcoa. And just as I was getting introduced, my son Zane, who was 13 at that time, leaned over. He said, "Dad, when you get up to speak for just 3 minutes. Do not speak more than 3 minutes." And I whispered back and said, "Why, Zane?" And he said, "Because your speeches are boring." Well, I told that story to a line started this summer 3 or 4 years later, right here in Inglewood. And a little Cub Scout named Angel came up to me and really surprised me. He said, "Mr. Duncan, your speech was good." And that part surprised me, but then he said, "Your son was right. It was boring, but it was short." So I never forgot that. But let me just thank all of you for coming here tonight. I can't resist. I think John Kroger may have left. I worked with him quite a bit, and I really admire Director Laws, who's seated out there among you. And I have so many friends in this area, and it was a real honor and privilege for me to be here with you. I want to especially thank Erica, who helped me out here and who helped run the show. And I want you to give a big hand to Todd, who put this program together. So thank you for coming. Good night.
I won't keep talking. I just want to point out before we leave, you look around this room, look at the youth movement in this district. That's something to be proud of. Right before we go, Tyler Boyd, our young Republican, has just a quick announcement, and then we'll let you go. Thank you again for coming. Tyler, if you'll real quick.